Welcome everyone on this second Metal3 Team Meetup. Today is 31st of January 2024, and as planned, we start the yearly meeting for the Metal3 community. You have probably already read this document to some extent, and how the meeting will proceed is that first I will just quickly summarize the results of our goals that we have discussed last year. You can also find these if you scroll down a little bit, you will find last year's meeting, and if you scroll further down quite a lot actually, then you will see topics that we have not discussed but were proposed, and then some topics that have been ruled out either because they were rejected by the community, or they are duplicates or some other reason. So is there any questions at this point before we would start the meeting, before I would start with the summary? Okay, if no questions, then so from last year I have picked or listed all these agenda topics that we were discussing and put the two priority topics at the beginning. I won't dwell on these in details. Many of you have experience with these specific topics. Just a general overview. I think our biggest or most important goal was the BMO and ironic image branching and the related governance documents and structuring these processes and managing them, and we were successful in that. So many thanks to all the contributors. Now BMO has a release branch and governance document for how to manage the releases, and the release team has already done BMO release, and the same is true for the ironic image. And then we have the addition of the fact that the ironic image is now pinned, the ironic image release branch is now pinned to a actual ironic release, the 23.1 bug fix release. So again, many thanks to everyone. This was a requirement for the incubation proposal that was not discussed last year on the Team Meetup, but we have done that also. If you were participating on the mailing list or on the weekly community meetings, you have seen that we submitted that also, and we are in the queue for incubation evaluation. So let's see what will be the feedback for that. And yep, this was a great help or a requirement in that. Is there any comments that anyone would like to share for this branching and release topic? If not, then I will continue. The next one, the next priority topic was the ironic feature incorporation, and this was not completely done because of how the priorities shifted, I think. Before I would continue, do you hear me correctly still, right? I'm not frozen, no weirdness is happening.
All good. It's good.
Okay. Good. So even last year on the first Team Meetup, we were discussing this pre-provisioning data, but from a bit different perspective. But I think now everything related to the pre-provisioning data and pre-provisioning network data and network data templating and all these things can be either handled by the new network configuration roadmap and CAPM3 IPAM network data templating proposal, which I have linked, that is being driven by Steven. And thank you, Steven, for pushing this topic, and thank you for everyone who were reviewing. I know quite a lot of people were joining on the topic and did a lot of great work. And you can read it if you follow the links. Then the next one was something that's mainly an Ironic topic. That was the basic authentication support for Ironic and Ironic Python agent for the image servers. This has been merged, and I have seen it listed in the release notes, but not for an active release, but just for upcoming stuff. I have local changes for modifying the devenv and integrating this into our test workflow, but because I have no pressure coming from anywhere, it's not yet there. Then the next one is the root device int operator support that we discussed early last year, and it went through a few stages. So original idea was frozen because we decided that the Ironic operator syntax, which coming from the Oslo libraries in OpenStack, those are very specific to OpenStack and Ironic, and we in the BMO we would like to have a more general way of specifying root disk characteristics, but that would be much more work, which was not something that we needed. And then there was a revised version of this, which I also linked, that explains that just one particular issue, and this is related to setting a maximum size for a root device hint, but after discussion on the Ironic chat and with a few other folks, I think mainly Dimitri and Zane, it was clear that that has implications in the Oslo, and so this is an in progress topic. I will get back to this when I have some time, but it will require very little change in the BMO, and it's already planned out in the issue that what will be changed in the BMO. The next one, this was a big change in Ironic, and this would be a big change for the MetaCube, is the firmware interface and firmware upgrade support. This is something that I believe, I'm not even sure who was pushing it in MetaCube.
It was me.
Yeah. So this is very good. This will be very useful. Would you like to just sum it up in 2 sentences?
Yeah, basically, like the work that is still ongoing, it's the controller part for working for the users so they can use the CRDs to update the firmware for the node.
Yep. So thank you. This is still a VIP topic, and I'm really interested in this and how this will be, how this will evolve in the MetaCube community. So yeah, thanks for everyone who contributed to this. And then we have two topics that were not really explored last year. We were discussing them quite a bit on the last year's meeting, but no actual work was done. Is the OCI support for IPA downloader and the node image downloads. So here the idea was just that now we can download these from basically HTTP servers, but it would be cool if we could do the same through like a Docker registry or any other from any other OCI registry, because there are some very restrictive environments where you can just simply, where you are just simply unable to host a separate HTTP server that would host files, but you because you are working with Kubernetes, you have at least one container registry somewhere. And yep, this might be explored further. I don't think this is a complicated or big thing, just quality of life improvement. Then the next one was the Ionic standalone operator. This was already mentioned by Dimitri on the last meeting, and this has progressed immensely during the year. And I'd like to ask you, Dimitri, to just in a few sentences sum this work up.
Yep, happily. So when I had some time when I was not too busy with other stuff, I developed this operator, which is an independent implementation that has nothing to do with OpenStack funds, just to be clear, that deploys Ironic using Ironic image, so using all our existing stuff in a few configurations. It has a lot of features already. It's largely untested, so don't hurry with that in production for sure, although I welcome testing on your lab environment and stuff like this. The bugs that Adam is showing now, I filed them as a to-do list for what we have to finish before this is actually a progress. Although I do believe if we make what is there work, it's already going to be a significant improvements over the task of deploying Ironic image manually and setting environment variables and stuff. So this allows declarative way to install Ironic standalone for the purpose of Metal3, but also with an ambition that maybe more people use that outside of Metal3 because it doesn't rely on any of the components other than Ironic image and MariaDB image. That's it. I need to submit it somehow formally for inclusion in Metal3. I need to rename it probably. I guess I'm settling on Ironic standalone operator simply because of my ambition to make it usable for people who may not use other Metal3 components, especially CAPM3. And finish the HA topic, which we're probably going to discuss further today.
Thank you very much. This will be a great addition. Yeah, I think just a proposal to the docs, and then we can move it. I don't think we have to wait for any sort of milestone. We can just take it into the project, and yeah, and I think we will have to open the Ionic standalone operator directory on the architecture or in the architecture design directory. Yep. Thank you. The next one was the multi-architecture support. I've seen some work done, and thanks Dimitri for adding this pull request also. If you would, you could sum up this one also.
So that's again absolute untested, just a dump of my ideas. I was thinking of what it would take to make Ironic image work with two architectures simultaneously instead of being built for only one architecture. So how do we make the same image that can work for deploying both Intel and ARM hosts? That is the outcome of that. Again, I haven't put in any testing. It's just my thought dump for those who actually want to push this topic forward. I'm afraid I won't have any time in the near future, but it's just the ideas you could reuse.
Thank you. Yep, I think that there might be some interest from at least our part, but I'm not sure. This is something that I was only hearing from you. Of course, this is like a very reasonable thing that we should support multiple architectures. And then the last one, this I had no experience with. This is the like finishing up the RAID support. I haven't really found any PRs or issues related to this. You can read, if you're interested in this, the last year's discussion. And if you know anyone knows anything about this, please add the PR or an issue link or proposal or any resource. So these were the two priority topics that we were discussing last year, and I think we done about like 75% of all the things that we envisioned here, which is, I think, very good. So thank you for all of you for the lots of contributions. And I will run through the other topics just quickly. So there were suggestions to use project boards. We started using them for the CI and the upcoming Contrib Fest, but we don't use them for planning future tasks yet in widely. And most of these project boards are actually private. So for the CI maintainers and for the folks who will do the Contrib Fest this year. But when I have time, I will try to make some system where we can put our future plans into these projects. The next one is I think the topic that we kind of ignored the most, and this is related to the more advanced documentation. I know that we have grown the user guide, and thanks to all of you, we have now much better quick start guide and much better documentation. But compared to what we discussed last year, we still came short, and we have not started working on the admin guide. And although we know how to use the E2E tests and have documentation and discussions around how to run them and what they are doing, we are not really explaining the use cases with like proper documentation. But I think these will come eventually. Just note that we are actually a bit behind on this, and we are getting feedback from the community. There is at least one open issue related to documentation, and that our documentation is not up to date, or examples are not applicable, and so on. But I think this will get better as the community grows. Then the next one is the non-Kubernetes based node lifecycle management. There was actually a proposal for this, and this proposal was approaching it from a new Metal3 host operator perspective, and we started to review it. But the original contributor has gone silent on this quite some time ago. So I put this to frozen, and feel free to join on this. I think there is still legitimate or enough value in this, so I wouldn't rule this topic out. And then the next one is the Prometheus and Grafana work. I know, at least in our team, there is ongoing work with the Tilt environment. So Tilt, for those who are not familiar with that, is a cloud native development environment. Basically, we have it integrated into the devenv, so you can spin it up and also to the CapM3. And if we would make it user-friendly and stable and well-maintained, then you would have a nice dashboard and additional dashboards like Grafana, Prometheus, and you could interactively modify the different components like CapM3, BMO, and so on. So it's a very nice project, and there is continuous work to integrate it. And thanks to everyone who is working on that. Then the next one is reducing the amount of bash. I see, Dimitri, you added a lot of things. From my side, I've seen some reduction of unnecessary and legacy stuff, but not mostly not bash. Would you like to expand on your comments, Dimitri?
Sure. I think, yeah, I agree with your assessment. We've only seen minor stuff so far, but there's a mailing thread that I started a few days ago about, actually maybe a bit longer, about reducing the number of architectures could help a lot. And generally, generally believe we should concentrate on maybe a fewer options in ironic image in favor of better support for each of them. And also we should stop the habit of exposing every option we're interested in explicitly. We have this OS underscore overrides, which we actually recommend for a few options already. And we need to keep these in mind. Maybe we should deprecate a few things in favor of that. So I agree, there's not a lot of progress, but there are a lot of opportunities, dropping inspector, dropping some architectures, and maybe being more conscious about stuff we add to ironic image. What I haven't really researched thoroughly is a possibility to move more stuff into ironic proper. We did that with some iPixel configuration. I have another proposal to deepen that further to add, move more iPixel script configuration into ironic. But that's definitely an area where we could research in 2024.
Yeah, I agree. And this sounds good. Moving more stuff to the ironic. And I would also like to how would I say that? I think what the folks who were writing the E2E tests recently, both for CAPM3 and BMO, I would like to thank you that you were already folks taking the same approach. I heard from many of you that the goal is to have less bash, less devenv, just try to make it as go heavy as possible. And I see that you succeeded with that. So both for the BMO E2E and the CAPM3 E2E, I think those new projects already went into this direction. So thank you, everyone. The next one is the API stable.
Sorry,
yep.
If I could interrupt you for a second. Whenever we cannot have bash less in metal3 devenv, could we go Ansible more or stuff like this at least?
Well, what I have discussed with folks is less bash, less devenv, and even less Ansible, and the goal would be to go as much as possible native Go.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm saying where we cannot do Go, let's at least do Ansible instead of bash.
Yep,
because it's easier reusable, easier reviewable, just better to control, better to contribute to.
Yep, I think this can be decided on a case-by-case basis, but yeah, if I compare Ansible to Bash, yes, I would tend to agree with you. Yeah. Or if we have if someone, but I wouldn't like to rewrite it in any other stuff, because I think the community is used to this Ansible, Bash, or the native Go stuff. Yeah. Okay. Next one is the API stabilization. This is there was some progress here. We had a long process of reviewing the beta V1 API proposal for BMO, but this was merged. Thank you for Dimitri, and thank you for all the reviewers who were working on that. But related to the API stabilization, we still have at least these three ongoing issue with mostly ownership between the CRs and how we clean them and who owns who. This is still a topic that's not very well not easily approachable for outsiders. That's we already noticed. So people who are getting started with the project, and Leonard made a very nice graph and some well detailed explanation in one of the issues, but I haven't found it. So Leonard, if you could please paste it here for the others to see. But this is the main trend that we have some things to fix around the ownership of CRs. Is there anyone who would like to comment on any of these topics? I just put their short description also.
I must say that I don't have a lot of time to continue the BTV1 work, which is not to say I'll never do that, but absolutely don't hesitate to take that over if you have cycles, because I can only have so many tasks that are not directly related to my downstream priorities, and inspector merger and is the first which I need to finish, ironic operator probably the second. So in my personal order of architecture priorities, BTV1 will be the third. And anyone can definitely beat me to it with all my guidance if you need.
Yeah, it's good to hear. Thank you. And yep, these topics are open to everyone. So I don't want to push the current reviewers or contributors who are already working or have worked on this. This is like for everyone. Yep, and thank you, Leonard. This is what I was looking for. If you need some inspiration or some overview, I would say, about the topic, then there is this issue what Leonard created, and yeah, this kind of explains very well on high level what is the not a problem but the challenge, I would say. Yep. Next topic. Is there any questions related to this, because it's quite heavy topic, this API stabilization and resource management? Okay, if not, then the next one is the network device management with SNMP. That was completely skipped, or with some other protocol. This was entertained, but no one had the time, and seemingly no downstream organization had the need for this. So this is still in the freezer. Next one is the multi-conductor setup for Ironic, and I think this was again a topic that can be lumped together with the Ironic operator, Ironic standalone operator, and I think we will discuss this today. So I wouldn't spend more time on this. We will have a separate discussion for this. The next one is the style guide for Metal3 project. And this will come, I believe, soon. This will arrive soon, but we have not created any governance document, as far as I know, related to specifically coding style. The next one is the Ironic and BMO pre-provisioning. This I already mentioned. This is a subset, or not a subset, but a parallel use case for what is now proposed by Steven, and this specific use case is listed in the drawback section, or under the drawback section of that proposal, because that proposal does not cover this specific use case. And this is the use case of DHCP-less static network configuration, where you have an IPA that is pre-built ISO, not dynamically built, packaged by Ironic, and that way you cannot inject any network data on the fly, so you would need to attach a second boot device, second block device. So this is specifically for that. Yes, Stephen, you raised your hand.
Yeah, so I thought it might be worth digging a little bit more into that use case to figure out whether there's additional work required, because if I remember correctly, the pre-provisioning image flow could be used to satisfy this use case, where it can consume the pre-provisioning network data, build it into the ISO image, including the Ramdisk components, and Dimitri and others can probably correct my memory here, but if I remember correctly, the OpenShift flow already does this. So I'm wondering whether we need to do additional work in the kind of community scope, or whether or not we can solve this particular workflow by suggesting that a pre-provisioning image controller is required.
Just before we would go further with this, I might have explained it a bit incorrectly. So yes, I agree with you. It can do all what you have mentioned. This use case is when you are not allowed to dynamically package these ISOs, because if I remember correctly, Ironic creates as many ISOs as many target nodes are present. Am I correct about that?
So yes, I guess you mean that Ironic is going to cache the ISO.
Yes.
And if the ISO is every time new, yes, Ironic is going to cache it during provisioning time as many times as you have nodes. There's no way around that really. We need them on our HTTP server. So yeah, if you want to save that space, you need to use the same ISO.
Yeah, my original use case is exactly that there is not enough space to cache them, and there is not enough space to cache them anywhere on the network, and that's why the config drive would be attached as a second block device. And this is the very edge case which is not covered by the current proposal. But this has, as far as I understand, implications in Ironic drivers. For example, would have implications in the Redfish driver. Yes, I think Julia, you raise your hand.
Yes, the problem here is that a lot of hardware doesn't actually support more than one device.
Yep.
In fact, I think we were only aware of one vendor that kind of does, and I think they've actually gone and removed it. Or maybe two vendors, but basically, I don't expect it to work across an entire hardware ecosystem. So mileage may vary dramatically if you're expecting to be able to attach a secondary device.
Yes, that I understand, and I agree with you. From my perspective, it would be just enough to give the possibility and then let the user suffer failure if it's not supported by the hardware. But of course, it's up to the Ironic community how we can approach this. As I said, this is an edge case.
Is it just to clarify? I don't think this is any blocker to proceeding with the proposal we've been discussing, but this is perhaps something we can consider as a follow-on if there proves to be a viable path forwards.
Exactly. This topic is, like, as I wrote, it could be aligned with that like main pre-provisioning data topic. It's not a blocker by any means. This is a edge case parallel to this whole discussion, and I think if we would implement everything that you have proposed after that, that would be a good time to look into this. So this could build on what you are already proposing, and it's mostly Ironic anyways. Is there any comments or questions related to this one? Okay, then we can continue to the next one. BMO API decomposition for multi-tenancy. I haven't seen anything related to this. And then the last one is spinning the dependencies. There have been a lot of good. Yep, Julia, I think you raised your hand. Or is it just my Zoom behaving?
It might be your Zoom.
Yeah, it's just stuck there. Awesome. Okay. Then the dependency pinning, it's being done. We have more dependencies pinned than before. For example, in the Ironic image, but also many of the GitHub action related dependencies have been pinned, and Go dependencies are being taken care of regularly. So I think we can just continue doing what we were doing so far. Okay, so this was the summary for last year quite a lot of things are still ongoing, but what we have prioritized last year, we progressed a lot. And thanks for everyone for that. Is there any questions to the summary as a whole before we continue? Okay, if not, then we can continue with the first topic of this year, which is this CAPM3 BMO API discussion. And I would like to ask Leonard to take over, as this is his agenda point.
Sure thing. All right, so this is, I would say, mainly a discussion starter. I don't expect that we will decide everything and have a ready design after today. But I think many of us has seen that there are some limitations with the way especially CAPM3 works currently. So I would say this is mainly about CAPM3 and how CAPM3 interacts with BMO. Maybe it would in the end also be some changes in BMO from this. But to start with, I think the list of these three things that I put on the top there are like the main thing, that we now require that the bare metal hosts are in the same cluster and namespace as the machine objects when using then CAPM3. And this there is no way really to do multi-tenancy in the same way that other infrastructure providers do. So if you look at cluster API provider for OpenStack or AWS or these, they all have some kind of credential that you give to the controller. So when you create your OpenStack cluster or what it is that you create, you give some kind of reference to a credential that it can use to reach this specific tenant for creating the resources, and we have nothing like that. So I would like to start the discussion around that. I added a few ideas at the bottom there. So the first possible way forward, without thinking about the credentials yet, is to just decouple from the same namespace. So then the idea would be that you can have bare metal hosts that are cluster-wide, and then you can have claims for them that would be in a namespace. So that would be just like persistent volumes and persistent volume claims. I'm not sure that this is a good idea, but that was my first idea, so I wanted to write it down. But let's say we combine this with the next one. So to get some kind of multi-tenancy, we split it up. So we would provide some kind of credentials to CAPM3 as for other infrastructure providers. That could be a kubeconfig or something else, but kubeconfig makes sense. Then that kubeconfig would give CAPM3 access to a cluster and a namespace where it can find bare metal hosts. And that way we achieve this kind of multi-tenancy. Then two different users can give two different kubeconfigs, and they can point to separate namespaces or clusters even. I would say that this should be combined with the above. I'm not sure if the bare metal host have to be cluster-wide, but I think the interaction that we currently have, where CAPM3 is directly editing the bare metal host objects, that is a bit not ideal. So I think it would be beneficial to add this bare metal host claim thing in between. So CapM3 would create claims, and then maybe BMO would fill that in. So just see, okay, there is a claim for one. I will select one that fits it and make that change. And what did I write in the final part? Right, yeah, because so then we get to the part that I am most unsure about, that where on all of in this scenario, where would we have the different objects? So where would the metal cube data belong, for example? I'm not sure about that. So if someone has some ideas about that, I would be very happy to hear it. Yeah, I see a raised hand. Pierre, go ahead.
We don't hear you, or at least I don't hear you.
Yeah, me neither.
You look unmuted, but nothing comes out really. Nope.
Anybody else while we wait? I see Dimitri, you commented already.
Yeah, I was typing just to avoid interrupting people, but it feels like BMH claims is anyway the first step towards this work.
Yeah, I agree.
And that also solves this problem with non-Kubernetes, how this topic was called previously, like the spec that got frozen essentially, because that's more or less a similar thing that they want, like a way to claim, at least a way to claim one host.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think it would. Now I hear someone.
Yeah, sorry, that was me. I was just going to mention regarding the comment around scope of things like Metal Cube data template, and we touched on this in the discussion around the pre-provisioning network data proposal, which we'll get to in a little while. And I think one of the things we were trying to do in that proposal was keep a clean separation between the bare metal host API and the machine scope of resources. So the templating that CapM3 does and the resources that are associated with the data template and all those pieces are kind of in the scope of the machine lifecycle. And the CapM3 controllers obviously then use that to generate secrets, which are then consumed by the bare metal host. So it seems to me that we do have a fairly clean separation there. If you had the bare metal host claim concept, and then the secrets could be in the same namespace as the bare metal host resources potentially. I guess the tricky thing there is that you're going to have, the controller is going to have to consume data templates in one namespace and then write secrets in another. But it seems like the actual logical split of the APIs is reasonably well defined as it exists today.
Yeah, that sounds good. I see the question now in the chat from Pierre. How do you handle pivot? Yeah, I would say that if we want to handle things similar to other providers, then we really need to draw the line somewhere there. Now I know in all the tests that we do, we move everything, the bare metal hosts also. I think that should be like optional at least. So I think that should be a separate thing. But yeah, if you can move them separately, then I don't see an issue. But what I'm trying to say here is that I would not want to assume that the bare metal hosts are in the same cluster as the Metal Cube machines, for example. So that in that case, it doesn't make sense to talk about pivoting for the bare metal hosts, if that makes any sense. One question from me maybe, is there any strong objection from going in this direction that we try to separate it more? I hear no objections, so that makes me very happy.
I think one thing which would be interesting to explore is the upgrade impact of this. It's not clear to me what the migration path would look like, and I guess we could explore that in a future proposal.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I definitely don't have it in my head how this would work, but it would be very interesting to investigate this.
It's probably possible if we make bare metal controller just backfill these claims for any bare metal hosts that are currently provisioned. Just a quick thought. There really should be a design spec on claims alone, and then maybe build on top of that the rest of this proposal.
All right. Yeah, I was going to say the same. That anybody else? I don't think I have anything more on this topic for now.
I think there is no strong opinion against it. So the only thing I would just like to suggest that if you have time, please create an issue, and then we could track this. This would be good for all agenda points, because as far as I have seen, all of these agenda points this year we have fewer than before, but these are all big topics. And it would be nice to track them as one epic or one big story, and then I can put them on a project board. Yep. Then thank you everyone. This was the first topic, and thank you Leonard for proposing this. Then the next one is the ironic standalone operator high availability discussion.
So do we want to maybe a 5 minutes break? Just we are nearly at the top of the hour. It seems to be a convenient time.
Of course, it's fine by me if it's fine by you folks.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yep. Okay, then 5-minute break. Okay, folks, can we continue? Or how would I ask this question reasonably? Like, raise your hand if you are not here, or Dimitri, are you back? Can we continue with your topic?
Yeah, Dimitri just sent a message on the chat.
Oh.
He will be back in a couple of more minutes.
Okay, then we can
So-
wait. We can start it anyways. Thank you so much.
I'm back here.
Okay, great.
It seems like we lost Leonard, right?
Yeah.
And that's a bit unfortunate because he has been the most active person in the discussion. So I wonder if we should reshuffle. Oh, the next topic is also by Leonard.
Yeah, we can reshuffle. I'm not sure how long he will be. Yeah, I'm not sure how long he will be away, but we can continue with the network configuration roadmap. That's also a very big topic and very important.
Yeah, Steve, would be happy to swap this.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. No problem. So I guess we could start with a little bit of context for those who haven't been following the proposal so far. So recently I started looking into how to best enable Metal3 deployments via Redfish Virtual Media in environments where there's no DHCP, so no provisioning network, no Pixie boot, and ran into a few challenges. The first one was that we didn't have a way to pass the node network data, which the ironic DHCP list flow uses to set the network configuration in the IPA around disk phase of the deployment. So that was recently solved via a new, excuse me, an API change to the bare metal host. And then the second problem after that was the IPAM solution we have in CAPM3 today only enables IP address management for the post-deploy IP address. So there's no way to control that static IP during the pre-provisioning phase. So that was the main focus of this proposal here. We've had some really good discussion over the last few weeks, so thanks to everyone who has contributed. I think most of the points of concern have been addressed, and this is now actionable. I haven't had time to sit down and write the code, but in summary, there's two changes. One would be support for a new annotation in the bare metal host, in the bare metal operator controller, and that would serve two purposes. One would be to enable us to stop the state machine transition to inspecting until the pre-provisioning network data is actually available. And the second would be to associate a new data template resource with the bare metal host itself. And that will contain a very similar template to the network data template we have for the network data secret today. So I think this is in reasonable shape, but given that we've got some friends from the Ironic community here today, I thought there were a couple of areas we could explore in more detail. But firstly, was there any questions, concerns, or areas to discuss about the proposal that we needed to cover today, or are we all reasonably comfortable with the direction that's been described there?
From my side or from ESJ side, we are comfortable with that.
Okay, that's great. Well, I guess if there are any further points of feedback, please add them to that. But unless I hear otherwise, I'm likely to start pushing up some draft implementation PRs over the coming weeks when time allows. But the one point which I think we haven't managed to have a good consensus on is the config2 disk label problem. So again, to recap here, the concern is that on redeployment of a host, you could potentially have the previous config2 config drive on the disk itself, and also the disk label that's applied to the pre-provisioning ISO image. It seems like there's several possible workarounds for this, but it would be good if we could reach a consensus with the Metal Cubed and Ironic communities on a common solution. One point of friction is that if we have like a dynamically generated disk label, which seems like it could be a good solution, the agent or whatever tool is reading the data at runtime would need to know about that. From my perspective, that's not a huge problem because you could quite easily have a wrapper for whatever tool it is. But I wanted to sort of open this one up for discussion. So maybe you could scroll up a little bit just to the improvement needed. So I don't know if Adam, Dimitri, Julia, or others might like to kind of contribute to this conversation, because although I can see some ways to solve this, I didn't include this in the scope of my current proposal, and I don't necessarily think we've got a kind of recommended solution to it.
So I'll start. I've been trying to fix this since August. I stopped in the end of November and haven't picked it back up yet. The long story short is it's a potential risk. You'd have to basically modify things, but in a default configuration with additional patches or additional code to cause it, or non-default states to basically cause it to actually be an executing risk. The challenge basically is that we have to break something somewhere. And we have to reach consensus on that and how we break it. For example, if we move away from the config2 label, then we lose some of the auto config stuff that already exists for the agent itself. So it's kind of one of those things where this is not a fun problem. We do need to work through the various cases and try and reach some sort of consensus. I dumped all my thoughts into a Ironic spec document, I guess about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago on this. The idea of using a pre-generated ID has grown on me, but at the same time, we have to break something, specifically the existing labeling. So and the existing use of static predefined images too might end up breaking and all that too. So it's just, we have to figure out what we're willing to give unless we want to support multiple means. And also we have operators using varying different models of deployment in cases which wouldn't necessarily be compatible. For example, one case is that we know some operators actually have built RAM disks that have code injection. And when I say code injection, they're actually downloading plugins dynamically before the agent starts, because they can version control that separately and they iterate on that quickly. Whereas the rest of the agent is fairly static for them, so they don't really care. That may not seem important to this community, but we know some of those operators would be very vocal and very unhappy. So I don't know what we want to do. It seems like in order to actually make forward progress, we might have to do multiple things. I don't know. I'll let others speak.
I was just gonna say, at least from my perspective, having kind of been digging into this problem for a little while now, a path forward that enables us to opt into some new behavior, I think would be perfectly fine, and that would at least lessen the impact on existing operators and provide a kind of migration path for those who want to opt into the new behavior. But I realize that's a burden to the Ironic community. But the specific kind of workflow I had in mind was a randomly generated disk label that's passed on the kernel command line. So then you can read that and then figure out which disk to mount. Is that a potential option that's already been discussed?
It is a potential option that has been discussed. The fundamental challenge is that we'd have to have launchers and we have to standardize. So for example, today, Glean and CloudInit both have default paths. CloudInit actually won't even look at this content unless it's explicitly flagged to do so. Glean will look at it, but the Glean launcher script will fail if there's 2 entries, basically, which is kind of awesome. So we have to basically have customized launchers ready to go. And one thing we do need to do, at least in Ironic community, is go basically determine if we're going to start limiting scope, because supporting both is problematic. We originally wanted folks to use Glean. CloudInit does actually amazingly work if it's set to look at the disk device.
So I guess the kind of workaround I've been looking at for the custom launches is just having a systemd unit, which can obviously figure out which disk to mount and then run the first boot tool. But I guess this is a segue. We don't necessarily have to move on to the next topic just yet if we've still got more to discuss on this one. But just to connect the two, I think that quite a few of us in the community are maybe not 100% tied to the OpenStack network data format, and obviously there's a limited number of tools that consume that format. CloudInit and Glean are the main ones, and a lot of the day 2 operations are coupled to different syntax options. And in particular, I think several of us in the community are interested in nm state and network manager configuration. And so what I've been looking at is some way to run nm state in the round disk and then run nm state as the first boot tool, so that can configure the network instead of CloudInit or Glean. And obviously that is going to require a different round disk image and a different configuration. But in the context of that kind of flow, a systemd unit to read a different disk label becomes a lot easier. But obviously there's that historical kind of inertia around CloudInit usage, which is definitely difficult for those users already invested in that path.
I don't think we would necessarily have a problem with a different format as long as there's a path to take. I think the challenge, or at least the pushback we've historically had, is any knowledge in Ironic Python agent itself to understand any format. We've always wanted to outsource that to another tool, which has both been a pain and a restriction. Adding knowing the basic OS level commands to execute is fairly simple, since we're just doing a short-term thermal configuration. But we've also had pushback at that. So I think one of the things Ironic needs to do is we need to limit scope to help solve the problem. And if we're also willing to decouple it, I think it's a lot easier for us to go, we don't need to necessarily worry about this. But yes, we are built around the OpenStack data format, and because it is a feature that you can technically invoke in a fully integrated environment, and it will drop the config in place.
Exactly. I guess that was the point I wanted to explore. So I've been looking at options, and I discussed this with Dimitri a week or so ago on Slack, and I started testing it this week, where we have an empty JSON schema, and we then pass in JSON format of nm state data basically, and then consume that on first boot instead using nm state derived tooling. So I mean, I'm unsure at this point whether there's enough of a consensus in the community that that's an interesting direction. But if enough of us are interested in that kind of direction in the longer term, I'm thinking the Metal cubed IPAM templating currently only understands how to render the OpenStack format. We could make that pluggable in the future, and either have the option to have kind of community provided alternative templating solutions, or if we think that nm state is interesting enough to a subset of the community, we could have a some way to opt into that instead of the OpenStack format. So I don't know if people have any kind of feedback on that direction and whether it's interesting, and perhaps there's scope for collaboration.
OpenShift uses nm state already, although in a way that doesn't make much sense upstream. So for us, it would be kind of an alignment. What I guess we would need is some tooling that doesn't just work for APA, but also works for final instances. So kind of sort of a path forward for operator who wants to use an M state. Like what they do is IPA, is it built in, like in the images we use, or do they need to use custom images, which is of course a hurdle? And what does it do with instance images, right? Because right now, if you download an Ubuntu Cloud image, I assume it has cloud in it. That's my assumption at least.
It will not work by default, but yes.
For instances?
It shouldn't. So for CloudInit to actually look at the data on disk before trying to DHCP, and it will, at this point, it will automatically fail if it's configured, if it can't get DHCP. So it will always attempt to DHCP. If it's not explicitly told with like launch with a -w flag, it will just fall over.
Interesting. So they broke CloudInit since I last checked, because it used to work, and it honestly it's quite a big thing for Ironix that it doesn't work anymore. But yeah, there at least used to be an assumption. Let's put it this way.
So that's a really interesting perspective. So I've been approaching it from the viewpoint that, we could customize the base image for a specific environment, and that customization of the image can configure the first boot behavior so that it runs on different tool other than CloudInit. But obviously, if we have a hard requirement to work with vanilla cloud images, that becomes much more difficult. I guess, similar to the previous comment, we could make it possible to opt into this flow, but there would need to be steps to build an image with, the right tooling to operate end to end.
Yeah, it's not a hard requirement, but we need an easy path for people. And for a long time, this easy path has been cloud images that upstreams publish. And if Julia says they no longer work, that's a bit of an issue. And building your own image is always fine, but that means we never can have it like the default path that we direct newcomers to, for example.
Yeah.
So, well, the thought that comes to mind is this is also you're going down a very specific path. If you're using this, you're not necessarily a generic path, because most tooling and most of those images just expect that you will always have some sort of network automatic configuration available.
That's not quite the case in my world. Like I have, among our customer base, there's a very strong presence of people who do not have DHCP or do not have any usable DHCP. Like they just DHCP some local network that is absolutely useless, or no DHCP whatsoever, and completely forbidden to have that. So it's maybe not the majority of people I'm dealing with, but there's a very decent proportion of people who do that as a requirement.
To generalize this sentence even a bit more, just recently CNCF was publishing a white paper about edge and edge segmentation. And in that paper, there is a section about the edge of the internet or telco edge systems. This setup there, that you don't have DHCP, is very common, sadly.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say, it's not like marginal case. We need to account for people who try to do that, and this may not be like hardcore operators like you, Steve, or other people here. These people may want some easy entrance, even though the area they're working on is not easy. Like telco edge is not easy, but they still want to, do it some way that may not even involve this image builder, for God's sake.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I guess I was approaching it from the standpoint that there's several of us in the community who are building downstream kind of productized solutions, and in that context, having some way to generate a special image or use a special configuration is not really a big deal. And it's helpful if we have consensus in the community so that that there's some common aspects to the environments we're dealing with. But you're right, if we need to make it very easy for kind of users in general, then the constraints are a little bit more difficult. I guess the main point is, none of this proposal would be to change the default path that exists today. CloudInit enabled images would still be an option. I guess I'm trying to find a path forward for those of us dealing with maybe OSs that don't have CloudInit, and are using Network Manager, and perhaps we could use some tooling that is a bit more of a native kind of fit. And in particular, I'm thinking when you want to do day 2 operations and you're using NM state, you've got the option of using Kubernetes NM state. I mean, there's obviously other syntax options around as well, but that seems to be one that several of us in the community are interested in. So I'm wondering if there's scope for, as you mentioned, Dimitri, some kind of alignment and collaboration around that.
Absolutely, that's the reason we use NM state. That's the literal thing that you said, because it's compatible with the day 2 operations, so people don't have to learn 2 things. Absolutely.
It sounds like there's no major objections, and we've got a lot of details, to figure out. My suggestion would be I try and make progress on the current proposal, which is just to solve the IPAM problem in the context of the network data syntax that exists today, and perhaps work on another proposal that would be a bit more of a longer term direction. And we could look at how to make that templating pluggable. And I'm not sure exactly what that would look like, but it seems like perhaps there's enough interest in that direction that we could collaborate and figure out the details together.
Just to give some feedback from our side, what you just mentioned, all of it, like the NM state support, would be very welcomed by us, and we, I believe, would be even like willing to have it implementation also, because that's whole topic that you described with all the day 2 operations, the format, the issue with the drive label, everything. This in this order, as you explained, was an issue for us, and we actually did it with Glean, with a patched version of Glean, with the addition to build a custom IPA that tells the Glean to look for a disk label, and then for this label we use this IRVFD dev, which, because I believe that was somewhere used in the ironic, maybe for looking for floppy or something like that, I don't remember, and that was a kind of a workaround where we went with this, but it's a bit painful. And then we tried clouding it, and exactly what Julia was explaining, this detection, we still have issues with it, and we kind of stopped halfway through implementing it. So NM state would be the best for us, actually.
So I had another suggestion in terms of a workaround, which I wanted to get feedback on. It wouldn't solve the case where Cloud Init or Glean is looking for the disk label unless we modify them. Sorry, Julia, I just realized you raised your hand.
Oh, no, go ahead, finish.
I was just going to say, what if we put a timestamp in the metadata? So CapM3 could add per bare metal host timestamp, and then if you find 2 config 2 disks, you would look at the metadata and figure out which is the newer one.
So I like the idea. There's my hope for not breaking anyone was to actually just let the agent sort out the mess. But the issue is we have operators out there that have additional things that where they download stuff. So that doesn't necessarily work. But if it's done as an external launcher or manager, it could work.
Yeah, I mean, to be completely kind of transparent about my plan, it would be have a systemd unit that figures out the mess via a script and then runs NM state, or a tool directly derived from NM state. So that was the kind of direction I'm thinking, but don't have code to show for it at this point. It's just the idea phase.
No, I personally like the idea. I think in ironic, we just need to sort out what we're willing to drop, what we're willing to move on from, and if we wanted the agent to sort things out or not. And there's some pending discussion for that as well. So I guess we should probably work in parallel and then collaborate some.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Thanks for the discussion.
Dimitri does point out that it does not solve an intentional collision, but yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that. I guess that's worth further thought, but I'm trying to figure out under what circumstances that could happen. But yeah, definitely one to consider.
Well, an user can interrupt networking of IPA during cleaning after this user's instance is torn down. So a user creates a fake config2 or modifies the existing config2 partition to have pre-configured networking settings. I don't know if it can cause any like actual security vulnerability, but that's definitely unpleasant if an instance user can modify the settings of something that belongs to the cluster itself.
But I guess is that a vulnerability that exists already? It's just a luck as to whether or not the config2 gets picked.
It doesn't actually. Glean falls down in Cloud and it doesn't process it by default.
Okay.
That's kind of what I was talking about earlier. The fundamental issue there, or fundamental path that I wanted to solve it in Ironic was to let Ironic go, because we have some validation logic that goes: is this a disk? Is this a vMedia device? Does this smell, look, and act like a CD or ISO image? If not, disregard the device, so that we can bypass those sorts of cases. That's kind of why I would love to solve this in the agent itself and just let it handle that and not just try and solve it externally. But yeah.
Well, there are paths forward for that too. We could extract a new callable so that it's not like the Ironic Python agent executable that does this, but Ironic Python agent early or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we could.
That would resolve many of my concerns, I believe, as long as we don't try to implement an M state in Python.
I think it's totally doable. And we could have early trigger very early and have it make that decision and try and set things in the right state. Because I think most everything will just run if folder's pre-mounted, which sounds awful. I'll have to check that. I guess I have an action item from this. I need to check that.
So we could solve the problem with the intentional collision by ensuring that the disk label we need to mount is passed in via the kernel command line. And then you would only mount the image that has been specified in the virtual media image that is used to boot the round disk.
We could probably do
the kernel.
We could probably do both. Because we have some logic to do early validation of devices, so that way we don't break other use cases, basically,
Right.
or other patterns of usage, and we just kind of prevent people from falling into this an orchestrated intentional collision where it will not be able to pick up or redeploy. Ultimately, that does help me, because I would love to have a back portable fix for this entire issue. We could also support an explicit label and all of that logic. That doesn't seem prohibitive, really.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like that might be one of the least impactful. Well, from an operational standpoint, it'd be very impactful. From a code perspective, some ironic option to say, give me a random disk label instead of a config2 via the kernel command line. If we could wire that in, and then, if that's turned on, you have to have some additional logic in the kind of agent phase, which is outside of the scope of what Ironic provides. That seems like it could be a nice path forwards.
Yeah, and that allows the operator of the deployment to say, I want this higher level security option, and where we also don't break or explicitly break use cases, basically, that people have already established and are utilizing today. So it becomes an opt-in. I want this to behave better or in a more secure fashion.
Great. Well, thanks for all the feedback. That sounds like an interesting avenue to explore. And I can't promise when, but I'll try and get a proposal written up for the NM state templating direction that I mentioned earlier, and see whether we can reach consensus around that.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, thank you for the great discussion. This was really interesting. Let's see what else we have. Let me just check whether Leonard has come back or not.
I am back, yes.
Okay, we skipped your Dimitri's topic because you are one of the main discussion partner on that. So I think we can go back to that. So this was the standalone operator high availability discussion.
All right.
I guess I could do a short introduction here, right? So as we discussed, we have this operator. We have quite a few bits that essentially reproduce the way Ironic is deployed currently using Customize. So I tried to do it as close as possible, model of the fact that I was opinionated in a few bits, and for example, did not implement architectures I don't want to see in the future. I could have also missed a few features, but that probably wasn't intentional. Now, the biggest point of concern here is one of the reasons we actually created Ironic standalone operator is to have a distributed architecture that is also prescriptive, so we can do it the right way, or maybe several right ways. That's the subject of discussion. But at least we don't leave people out in the code with a lot of YAMLs and a lot of bash. So the two key issues we have discussed, and there is a third issue we discussed, and I'm actually not sure why we may need to circle back to its beginning, is JSON RPC and iPXE. And I'll try to provide a quick summary. If you get lost at this point, maybe just go and read this whole thing because it's a bit hard to retell it. So JSON RPC is required for multi-conductor Ironic. Multi-conductor Ironic means we start several Ironic instances and they organize automatically in a cluster. That just happens. And you can hit any API instance of this and it will be, your request will be spread in the cluster and forwarded to the right conductor. And I'm using the word conductor here as a synonym for like all-in-one Ironic because in our case, it's not different. But for the proper RPid stack, it could be different executables. The key problem is these Ironic instances have to talk to each other. So they have to use something which could be IP address or host name, and they have to use TLS on that. You know, there's something we've had a bit of back and forth with Leonard and Adam, I believe, is what we use as this host names or IP addresses, and how do we do TLS on them? That's a bit of a tough problem. I'll summarize the other problems just before we start and jump into discussions. The iPXE one is a bit easier, but having several DNS masks is a pain, solvable pain, but still unpleasant. If we have one DNS mask, which is the variant I'm leaning towards right now, is then it will only direct all requests to one Ironic. And Ironic itself is fine. As I told you, it's load balancing automatically, but there's also HTTPD. So each Ironic, if you remember the architecture, each Ironic has an HTTPD instance next to it that serves its files. And that includes iPXE scripts. So if DNS mask points at one Ironic, Ironic itself is okay, but iPXE scripts will not be there because they may belong to a different Ironic and they are not clustered. There can be a few answers to that, and Julia suggested in the past to actually start kind of clustering that. And I'm leaning towards a bit simpler thing, which is boot configuration API. You see a link on the screen right now, where we use the clustered property of Ironic itself. So essentially, iPXE scripts will not be served from HTTPD, they will be served from Ironic. And Ironic will do the needful because Ironic is aware of other instances of Ironic. So that's a list of my concerns right now. So I welcome feedback on that. And maybe if you have use cases for having several DNS masks. Now, the last thing we kind of dived into discussing load balancers, and it was pretty useful and interesting. And now I'm a bit wondering why we did that, because what are we going to load balance there? So I might have just forgotten the context. There are a lot of interesting stuff going on there, but in the end, I'm not quite sure what we are going to load balance, because Ironic itself is a load balancer. So any general comments before we dive into probably the first topic and then maybe the last topic? I guess either no or nobody has heard me. So
it was audible.
all right. So I guess JSON RPC. There are a few things that people have discussed, and I was thinking about like composing host names based on something, and we talk about services. But does anyone really have any opinions on this topic? Like what we can use to distinguish instances in a daemon set and make them talk to each other?
Does it have to be a daemon set, or could we use a stateful set? They have benefits with these like unique identities, and you always get the same kind of order and stuff.
We actually have discussed stateful sets back in there have been a few like scary looking limitations about them, right? So you cannot like really shut them down
Right.
or something.
I remember now. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot that discussion. I think we could use them still, but yeah, there's a good point. For the load balancer, I was still thinking about that. So Ironic load balances, yes, internally. So I guess my question is, how would you expose it normally, like to BMO then, or I guess that's the context here. So BMO needs to reach it, and also the bare metal hosts.
So these are different problems. BMO to reach that's probably where you want to have a load balancer.
Yeah.
I don't know if we should add this functionality to the Ironic standalone operator, or it should be just a separate operational decision, honestly, especially since everyone is using different load balancer apparently.
Okay, yeah, but that's already I think a good idea. So if we can make it so that it's sort of separate, the operator sets up Ironic, and then you can sort of plug in whatever way you want to expose it. That sounds good to me, actually.
For bare metal host, it may actually be beneficial to not roll them through a load balancer and to actually make them talk to the very instance that is responsible for them. So not talk to a load balancer, but talk to a specific Ironic, which is easy to do because you have this IPX script or ISO image that is pointed at Ironic, and it can point at it's essentially the same Ironic that is responsible for configuration. That's what I'm trying to say. And if you do that, you skip the actual JSON RPC step because it's a local call. I may be a bit vague here. Let me know if you're following.
I think you're a bit in the abstract, honestly, because I'm struggling to follow along a little bit.
Yeah, so imagine you're deploying a node. So there is one of the three Ironics that is responsible for it. It will create it will provide its iPXE configuration, for instance. That will have a callback URL. Right, this callback URL is pointing where to talk to Ironic API. So that's one of 3 Ironics will provide that. And that's what we call the Ironic responsible for this node. It's like a semi-permanent state. If it can provide an API URL that is load balanced, sure. But if it provides the URL of itself, like its own URL, then when the node comes back and talks to Ironic, there won't be this JSON RPC call from the wrong Ironic to the right Ironic. Is it like a bit clearer now?
Just the last part is still a bit messy. Wrong and not wrong. Ironic after the node comes back. That last sentence was not clear to me.
So there is Ironic responsible for each node. So of 3 Ironics, there will be 1 responsible for each node. This Ironic will provide the configuration. And this Ironic is the Ironic we need to call back to.
You're trying to, oh, sorry. If I can give it try and grasp on this, you're trying to avoid that JSON RPC call to a different Ironic process.
Yeah, it's just a micro optimization, but it's a nice one, right?
Yeah, and that works.
So for those who don't follow, so imagine, okay, this node boots. It boots from configuration of Ironic 2. The Ironic 2, when preparing this configuration, has to put some Ironic API URLs there. It can be a URL of Ironic 2 itself, or it can be a URL of load balancer. So it's called IronicalB. If it goes to IronicalB, so the node boots and goes back, it goes back to IronicalB. IronicalB will call to some Ironic, say Ironic 1. Ironic 1 says, okay, the Ironic responsible for this node is Ironic 2. So Ironic 1 calls through JSON RPC to Ironic 2, and that's how you end up getting your response. Right, so we get 2 indirections here. On the other hand, if we put the URL of Ironic 2, we know that once it comes back, it directly goes to the right Ironic. Now you can object me, and that's actually something that happens downstream for us, is what if Ironic 2 is gone by this time? So that may be a reason to use load balancer still. And I guess it has to be an option because, as I told you, we actually have like poor man's load balancer downstream for this purpose. So this like, I guess I'm correcting myself. There's a reason to have 2 options here. And I guess Ironic standalone operator has to have some input to say, okay, am I load balanced or am I not? Does this all make sense?
Yeah, it does. But now we discuss the balancing from mainly the perspective of the API endpoints, but we have the story of this whole DNS mask and iPXE, and that's twofold issue. One is that those are tied to the at the moment tied to the host network, and the other is that we are planning to have multiple of those DNS mask controlled networks also. So for me, that's the area where things got messy with these load balancers and whatnot. So that basically had to manage the whole DNS mask iPXE story in this like scalable cloud native way. That's and there would be also like a role of some load balancer, I believe, because we have to provide in the DNS mask config also address for the iPXE firmware, or maybe I think both the firmware files and also the iPXE config files, maybe. I don't remember now.
Before I address that, who has raised their hand? So maybe give him opportunity to speak.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I just, yes, thanks. I have a question to you, Dimitri. If I understand you correctly, like from our other talks as well regarding Ironic, it is a supported case for Ironic that it can run by itself as a load balancer. So I wonder what was the design there? Because it cannot be just us that having the issue that one Ironic might die, and it happens to be the Ironic that gets the traffic. So is there any mechanism there to counterpart that? And I
There
wonder if
actually
that can be
is.
used here.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So there is a mechanism, and it has a weakness. So actually, when Ironic dies, that handles the node, its responsibility goes to another Ironic. So say Ironic 2 is gone, and now Ironic 3 is responsible for this node. It's going to prepare a PXE files and get all the business automatically. That's all good. The problem is, what if you already have an agent RAM disk started on your host? It's in available state, for instance, or it's doing cleaning and it takes time, and it's hard beating to Ironic, right? To let Ironic know its state and get new instructions from Ironic. And if your Ironic URL that the agent knows is load balanced, it's all good, right? Because it will get, the request will get to the new Ironic 3 eventually. But if it has Ironic 2 hard-coded on boot, because it's part of like an ISO image or it's a PXE configuration, there's no way for it to know that Ironic 2 is now gone. It will keep trying to hard beat to Ironic 2, although it has to hard beat to Ironic 3, but it doesn't know that. Is it more or less clear, the problem?
Yeah, I understand that problem, but I mean, it has to happen as well for like normal Ironic, meaning like Ironic that runs by itself, right?
It does. It does. Normal Ironic operators tend to front end the API with some sort of load balancer, so that the front end access to the API is spread across many APIs, and the APIs will then reach out to the conductors for conductor level actions because it's done in separate processes via JSON RPC, where those actions, it tracks that and knows that and will fail one of the conductors if they stop heart beating, or if they go to an offline state, or if they start shutting down, which causes what's called a rebalance internally.
Okay, so that means that for the normal Ironic operator, there has to be another load balancer.
There doesn't have to be, but it's encouraged if you're doing any sort of scaled environment.
Okay, so it makes sense for us to have it as well. Thanks.
I'd also like to know, although it's not encouraged to do that as a load balancing measure, now Ironic supports several URLs. You can provide, theoretically, you can provide all URLs. It's not like a great way to do load balancing. I don't recommend that, but it's a possibility. So yeah, I guess you convinced me that load balancer is kind of something we should encourage. Although probably not depend on because of the problems we discussed with Leonard, the bug. So now to your Adam question about IPX and stuff. So that's IPX is a bit different. It's not exactly the same problem. So first, you cannot load balancer it in the current Ironic architecture because IPXE configuration, so HTTPD servers are not equivalent. You cannot just route your request to a random one. You need to route your request to the right one. That's different from Ironic, where you can just call any Ironic and it will be fine. So my configuration API proposal is actually to tackle this problem, to allow Ironic to serve IPXE files, in which case you can talk to any Ironic and you can load balancer that. Is this part more or less clear?
Partly, yes. So you would take basically this iPXE firmware and iPXE like script files from the DNS mask and serve it through the Ironic. Okay, I get it, but then we have the bootp protocol that responds to these tags and it's like layer 2 stuff. How would Ironic handle that?
Ironic one. So it's a smaller scope than you think. The problem is only with iPXE scripts because these are not static. When you're saying like firmware, iPXE firmware, other firmware, they're like they're constant. So that they are not a problem. We can have as many DNS masks as we have. We can have as many iPXE EFI files or SNP only EFI files. They are all the same. And similarly for HTTPD, if we have some constant files, like, I don't know, do we have any Ironic Python agent kernel? If it's all the same, we can just have them on all instances. That's not a problem. The problem is with stuff that is generated dynamically, which are iPXE scripts per node. And these are just text files served always using HTTP. They're not like TFTP or stuff. So that part is okay. Now the second part is DNS mask itself and what to do with DHCP. And you can have several DNS masks per network. That's a bit painful to configure. I'm not sure to which extent I want to start doing several provisioning networks at this point, although you can try convincing me it's a good idea. But my thinking was Ironic itself is run as daemon set. And then DNS mask is run as a deployment on the control plane. So this one DNS mask. In this one DNS mask routes. So it serves firmware from whatever it can serve. Like TFTP, it has built-in TFTP. So the firmware is served from there. When it comes to iPXE scripts, it redirects to Ironic. And that can be load balanced Ironic or just the Ironic adjacent to it. So essentially random Ironic. Say if DNS mask happens to coincide with Ironic 1, it will either go to this Ironic LB if it's present or to Ironic 1, just always. And the idea of my configuration API is to make Ironic 1 aware of the situation and be able to request the configuration from Ironic 2.
Okay, so basically these files that we are talking about, this is a template for those dynamic files. We are using it for now here for a different thing, but yeah, these files are generated. And just to understand it, so we generate these, and after the boot iPXE file loads, these will be loaded, but these are, if I remember correctly, not loaded via IP addresses even, but the script running in the iPXE firmware will look through the MAC addresses, and though it will kind of request it through the matching interface or something like that, right? Because when these are generated dynamically, I remember that in the Ironic directory, shared directory, there are a MAC address, like directories with MAC addresses in their names. So
you're correct. Yes.
Yeah. So that's how they found each other right now. So at what point? So you say that the Ironic would take over this responsibility. So okay, the Ironic. It doesn't matter how we send the boot pixel or the firmwares. Then the Ironic would. How would the Ironic give these to the node, like these dynamically generated ones, if it's not the DNS mask? Yeah. Oh no, but basically almost right now it's right now almost the same.
It's not DNS mask.
Yeah. It's already the Ironic that generates these and creates those directories with the MAC address names.
Yeah, it's
Uh-huh.
already fully dynamic. It's just so served by HTTPD. Sorry, Jury.
No, I think what you're hitting upon is what you're expecting to exist is generated or reconstituted on each controller or each conductor as part of the rebalance operation. So when Ironic realizes that a conductor is going down or is no longer responsive, it will go regenerate all these folders
Mm-hmm. Oh,
based
okay.
upon configuration that it has that's shared across all of them in the database.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, now this is a bit more clearer to me.
Okay, I guess we had it a bit of like a knowledge sharing session. And maybe we can continue on the RFE and maybe start looking which parts we can actually start implementing. I believe we had some agreement on load balancer, right? To at least support them and to add some way for people to plug their load balancers. IPXC, okay, we discussed that. JSON RPC, we haven't really, but there was this idea with headless services, which probably try to investigate.
I think the only thing that would be preventing in some of that is, or I think we fixed some of the cases with the URL loading and population for the JSON RPC registration. So I think that shouldn't be a problem if you just use what's there already.
Yeah, our biggest problem is TLS configuration, really. We need to provide certificates that are valid for JSON RPC, and Kubernetes doesn't help with its unpredictable IP addresses.
That is indeed a challenge.
So somebody, I don't remember if it was Adam or Leonard, suggested we use Kubernetes headless services, which allow us to allocate a name and artificially point it at an IP address. That's a bit annoying because we need to maintain this constantly. And that's why people are talking about stateful sets, which do it for you. But stateful sets have limitations, and maybe we just bite the bullet really and what I'm saying. Maybe we just really manually handle this.
Would it be this is a bit outside my area, but so sorry if it's a stupid question, but would it be an idea to let's say delegate the TLS setup? Yeah, like this, yeah, service mesh, what Adam is selecting here. So I'm thinking that I have seen many projects where they do it so that the main thing that you are dealing with is completely unencrypted, and then you have a sidecar container that takes care of this mutual TLS and setup of that. Of course, it doesn't take away the issue. We still have to do it, but then it's not so tied into Ironic itself. But then Ironic would probably need to talk over localhost or something unencrypted to this other container.
Yeah, I guess we're swapping one complexity for the other, really.
Yeah. But that's food for thought, at least. I have seen that in other projects, so it may be one way to copy them or something.
Here I could have a rant that Kubernetes lacks so many basic things that then are added as add-ons, and then you cannot rely on these add-ons because one cloud will have them and the other will not. I'll probably save this rant for KubeCon. If some of you are attending, we can have a drink and just rant about this for a long time. I guess I'll freeze the mic. First, we're at the top of the hour, and second, yeah, I've just talked for too long. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Dimitri, and thanks for everyone for the feedback on this topic also. Okay, so as we are now, I think we went into this standalone quite deep, and yeah, this is still something that it's still a long way to go. I believe we still have not come to the final conclusions. But at least the issues are quite clear. So how we are looking right now is that we have one BMO E2E test roadmap, what we would discuss in the inspector phasing, out phasing discussion. Now, we spent all the 2 hours already, but we only have these 2 topics left. What would you prefer? Rather discuss these on the next community meeting, regular community meeting, or would you be interested to go through this? So what I would say is that who here would not stay because like you have other better stuff to do. So is there anyone who has to go now?
I will go. So I would prefer if it's in the community meeting next time.
Yeah, I agree. I have to go, and BMO E2E I think fits well in the normal community meeting.
Okay, so 2 of you are dropping. Quite few of you are already tired. So if there are no strong objections, this inspector phasing out discussion and the E2E test roadmap will be discussed on the community meeting. So then thank you for all your time and all the good topics and discussions. And yep, I think this was very fruitful, and I think we will keep these meetings yearly, but let's see on next committee meeting or the one after that we can discuss that would it be better to have 2 of these a year, two these shorter 2-hour meetings, or how should we proceed? I will upload the recording, and as usual, once again, thank you for all your efforts and contributions. And then let's meet next week on the community meeting. And until then, have a nice rest of the week and day. And with this, the MetaCube Team Meetup in 2024 has ended. Thank you.
Thanks
you
a
all.
lot.
Have a
Bye,
productive
everyone.
day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.